Rain. Rain hammered the streets like a drum, each droplet shattering on asphalt with the sound of gunfire. Joe Malone's bike tires hissed across slick pavement as he skidded around a corner near the Lower East Side. He froze for a fraction of a second, seeing it, a small metallic chip lying in the middle of the street, reflecting the neon glow of a distant diner sign. The faint hum coming from it felt almost alive. Joe knew instantly this was no ordinary delivery. This was the kind of thing that could get a man killed in under 10 seconds. Joe Malone was 62, an aging food delivery courier with decades of New York's alleys, rooftops, and secret stairwells burned into his memory. He had delivered meals to penthouses where billionaires dined on gold leaf desserts, to the back doors of forgotten tenements where the city's ghosts whispered in corridors of damp concrete. Tonight, he wasn't delivering food. Tonight, he was carrying survival itself, though he didn't know it yet. His leather jacket was soaked through, his hair plastered to his forehead by the November rain. Every sound of the city, the distant wail of sirens, the scuff of a stray cat, the metallic clang of garbage cans knocked over, was amplified in his ears. His eyes never left the street ahead, and his hand hovered near the chip in the puddle. For decades, Joe had learned a rule about New York. The city sees everything. The city tells no secrets, but it whispers them to those who listen. From the shadows, 3 black SUVs emerged, engines rumbling like low, menacing growls. Men in tailored suits stepped out, faces partially hidden under caps. Their movements were precise, rehearsed, professional. Joe's heart rate spiked. He knew exactly who these men were: corporate enforcers, killers for hire who operated above the law. The smallest mistake tonight could cost him his life. He kicked off his bike and accelerated into a narrow alley, water spraying from his tires. Rain lashed against his face, stinging eyes and skin alike. He could hear the SUVs following, engines growling, tires skidding. Every instinct screamed to keep moving, every muscle tense. The Lower East Side at this hour was a ghost town, a maze of alleys, crumbling brick walls, and rusting fire escapes. Joe had memorized every corner, every shortcut, every way to vanish in plain sight. He zigzagged between dumpsters, leapt over puddles that could swallow a foot, and ducked beneath fire escapes where the enforcers' flashlights could not reach. The chip in the street behind him pulsed faintly, like a heartbeat. He could feel its weight in his jacket pocket. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about information. Information that could topple a corporate empire and get countless people killed in the process. And now, Joe Malone was the only man who knew where it was. The alley ended at a fire escape leading to a series of interconnected rooftops. Joe swore quietly as he assessed the gap between buildings. One wrong step, one misjudged jump, and he would plummet into the wet streets below. He leapt, landing on a rooftop covered in slick tar. Rain ran in rivulets down the edges, and the wind howled across the gaps between buildings. Below, the SUVs were slowed by the maze of alleys, searching blindly, lights scanning the shadows. Joe moved silently, like a predator, guiding himself through the maze of fire escapes, water towers, and old HVA units. He had done this kind of navigation hundreds of times before, but never with bullets flying so close. A man appeared on the rooftop ahead, stepping out from a shadow. Joe's hand shot for the pipe strapped to his bag. Joe barked. Joe froze for a heartbeat, assessing the angle. The man fired a gun, and a bullet ricocheted off the water tower just inches from Joe's head. Adrenaline surged. Joe dove into the nearest shadow, pressing his back against the wet wall. The enforcer's footsteps echoed, searching methodically. Joe waited, counting silently. 1, 2, 3, and then he moved. A leap across a gap, a roll to absorb the impact, and he vanished down the next series of fire escapes. After 10 tense minutes of rooftop navigation, Joe found an abandoned loft above a warehouse. The windows were cracked, rain dripping in, and the air smelled of mold and wet wood. He crouched, listening for footsteps, then exhaled slowly. The chip was safe in his jacket. He placed it on a metal crate, inspecting it carefully. It contained information far beyond corporate greed: illegal experiments, falsified trials, deaths disguised as accidents, and financial trails connecting Helix Pharmaceuticals to high-ranking politicians. Joe's old courier instincts kicked in. This city was alive, and it knew where every mistake could be found. But tonight, he had the streets and their secrets on his side. A soft knock at the loft startled Joe. He raised the metal pipe, eyes narrowing. "Joe Malone?" a voice said. He lowered the pipe slightly. Eleanor Vance stepped inside, her eyes scanning the room. She held a folder, trembling slightly. "Everything you need is here," she said. Joe gestured for her to sit. "Then let's get to work," he said. As they went through the documents together, the gravity of the situation became clear. Helix Pharmaceuticals wasn't just greedy, they were dangerous, ruthless, and untouchable. And now, Joe Malone and Eleanor Vance were the only people standing between them and complete exposure. Joe pulled out a small, battered notebook. He traced escape routes, safe houses, and alley shortcuts. Outside, the city moved on, unaware of the deadly game unfolding in its shadows. "We need allies," Joe muttered. Eleanor looked confused. "Who?" "People who move unseen, who know the streets like we do. Couriers, night shift workers, doormen, people who owe me favors," he said. "They'll help us vanish, hide, and strike back. But timing is everything. One mistake, and it's over." From the corner of the loft window, Joe noticed movement below, a drone hovering silently, scanning rooftops. The faint hum of rotors was unmistakable. "They know exactly where we are," Eleanor whispered. Joe clenched his fists, eyes cold and focused. "Good. Let them come. The streets know us. And tonight, the city is ours." Joe Malone and Eleanor crouched behind the crumbling brick wall of the abandoned loft. The drone above hummed softly, its light scanning the rooftops. Joe's eyes darted across the skyline, counting fire escapes, vents, and gaps in building edges, every route a potential escape. "We move now," he whispered. Eleanor nodded, clutching the chip in her coat pocket. Together, they slid down the fire escape, rainwater slicking the metal steps, and dropped silently into the alley below. The SUVs had stopped temporarily, scanning the streets for movement, unaware of Joe's intimate knowledge of the city's hidden arteries. Joe led Eleanor into a narrow doorway behind a shuttered deli. The stairs descended into the subway maintenance tunnels, forgotten, damp, and echoing with the dripping of water from cracked pipes. "This way," murmured, checking each corner. The tunnels twisted and split into multiple paths. He navigated them instinctively, years of courier experience guiding him. Eleanor shivered in the damp cold. "I've never been in places like this," she admitted. Joe glanced back, eyes hard. "Most people don't notice the veins beneath the city, but I do. And tonight, it's going to save us." Above them, the SUVs turned down a side street, lights cutting through mist. Joe froze instinctively, ears straining. A single shot rang out somewhere above, ricocheting against a metal door. Joe grabbed Eleanor's arm. "Stay low, keep moving," he said. They ran through a series of maintenance rooms, ducked under rusted ladders, and slipped through a grated ventilation shaft. The sound of footsteps and muffled shouts from above echoed like a warning. Helix wasn't giving up. After what felt like hours navigating tunnels and hidden staircases, Joe led Eleanor to a small, abandoned basement beneath a shuttered factory in Brooklyn. The room smelled of mold and wet concrete, but it was dry, and the entrance was hidden beneath a loose metal grate. Joe set the chip on a metal crate, pulling out his laptop. "This is bigger than any delivery I've ever made," he said, opening encrypted files. Eleanor leaned over, reading names, transactions, and photographs. "This is unimaginable," she whispered. "They've killed people for this. They've covered it up completely." Joe's jaw tightened. "They think money makes them untouchable. Tonight, they're going to find out how wrong they are." Joe began mapping escape routes and safe houses on a worn subway map, marking rooftops, tunnels, and alley shortcuts with a pen. "I've made a few calls," he said. Eleanor looked at him, skeptical. "Calls? To who?" "People like me. Old couriers, night shift workers, people who vanish in plain sight. They owe me favors, small debts, but tonight, that's enough," Joe explained. "They'll cover us if we need to move fast, distract enforcers, or even provide temporary shelter." Eleanor realized the scope of Joe's experience. "This isn't just survival," she murmured. Joe smiled faintly. "No, this is war, and the city is our battlefield." A faint knock echoed through the basement door. Joe motioned Eleanor to stay back and opened it slowly. Rico, a wiry, agile man in his late 30s, with eyes that had seen every corner of NYC, stepped inside. "Joe," he said softly, scanning the room, "you're deep in it this time. These people, they don't play fair." Joe handed him the chip. "We need routes, diversions, and eyes on the street. Can you help?" Rico nodded. "Let's disappear them first, then we'll see about hitting back." With Rico's help, Joe and Eleanor now had allies, people who could move unseen, navigate the city's hidden arteries, and provide crucial cover. Joe, Eleanor, and Rico moved out as night fell. The streets above looked calm, but Joe knew better. From the rooftops to alleyways to abandoned tunnels, New York breathed secrets, and tonight they would use every secret. The trio split at intervals, reconvening at predetermined points. Joe's strategy was clear: move fast, stay hidden, and confuse the enforcers. Drones were still above, but they could only watch, not understand the city like Joe did. Eleanor marveled at Joe's knowledge. "I didn't realize the city could bend like this," she said. Joe grinned faintly. "Most people never notice the cracks and shadows. That's why they're invisible. That's why we survive." From the corporate towers of Helix Pharmaceuticals, executives watched. Monitors displayed live feeds, drones scanning every street. "They're moving too fast," one operative said nervously. The CEO's eyes narrowed. "They've gotten lucky so far, but we've underestimated Malone before, and we won't again. Increase surveillance, deploy teams, and don't let them breathe." The threat was closing in, and Joe knew it. Every second counted. One mistake, one misstep, and the enforcers would catch them. Joe led Eleanor and Rico to a series of abandoned warehouses. Using stacked crates, fire escapes, and hidden alleyways, they created false trails, making it appear the group was moving in multiple directions at once. Rico whispered, "They're buying it, for now." "For now is enough, but it won't last. We need to reach a safe point by dawn. Then we start figuring out how to strike back." As they crouched behind a stack of crates near the Brooklyn waterfront, Joe glanced at the city skyline. A black SUV glided silently along a deserted street, stopping at a precise location beneath a street lamp. Its occupants stepped out, guns drawn, scanning the area. Eleanor swallowed hard. "They found us again," she whispered. Joe's eyes hardened. Let them. We've got the city on our side, and the night is ours. Joe Malone crouched behind a stack of air conditioning units on a derelict Brooklyn rooftop. The night air smelled of wet tar and diesel, punctuated by distant sirens. Eleanor pressed herself against the wall, clutching the chip tightly. Joe's gaze scanned the horizon. Below, headlights swept across the wet streets. The black SUVs weren't far behind. "They're persistent," whispered Eleanor. Joe gritted his teeth. "Persistence is their only weapon. Knowledge is ours. And we know every fire escape, every alley, every shadow in this city." With a swift motion, Joe leapt across a gap to the next rooftop, landing silently. Eleanor followed, her heartbeat pounding like a drum. Rico moved beside them, agile and silent, a shadow within shadows. The enforcers below realized the rooftop escape and were now coordinating, sending searchlights and drones into the labyrinth of fire escapes and alleys. Joe motioned to Eleanor, "Stay low, move fast." They weaved through precarious rooftops, balancing on rusted vents and narrow ledges, always just ahead of their pursuers. A drone hovered too close. Joe swiped a metal pipe, hitting it with precision. Sparks flew, and it crashed noisily onto a lower roof, drawing the enforcers' attention away from their real path. Eleanor gasped, her hand shaking. "Joe, we can't keep doing this forever." Joe's face was grim. "Tonight, it's enough. We survive tonight. That's all that matters." Descending through a fire escape, Joe guided them into a network of alleys few New Yorkers ever noticed. Broken fences, graffiti-covered walls, and abandoned warehouses created a maze that would be deadly for anyone unfamiliar with it. "This way," he whispered, pointing to a barely noticeable metal door beneath a graffiti mural. Rico kicked it open, revealing a narrow passage lined with old subway tracks and forgotten pipes. Inside, the sound of dripping water and rats moving among debris filled the air. "Welcome to the veins of the city," Joe said, voice low. Eleanor followed closely, marveling at the precision with which Joe navigated the labyrinth. "It's like a second city," she murmured. Joe didn't reply. Every nerve was tuned to danger. After a tense run through the tunnels, they stopped in a small, dry alcove. Joe pulled out the laptop and inserted the chip. The files revealed Helix Pharmaceutical's darkest secrets. Human experiments conducted off the books, deaths disguised as accidents, top-level political connections, money laundering across offshore accounts, data showing suppressed warnings and internal whistleblowers silenced permanently. Eleanor gasped. They've killed people to keep this hidden." Joe nodded grimly. "They believe they're untouchable, but tonight we're going to change that." He traced a finger across the files. "This is the proof, enough to bring them down, if we survive." Joe mapped escape routes, diversions, and potential ambush points on an old subway map. "The city itself is our ally." "The city itself is our ally," he said. "Rooftops, alleys, abandoned tunnels. Everywhere they look, we can be elsewhere. The streets speak if you know how to listen." Eleanor watched him, awe and fear mixing in her eyes. "You really know every inch of this place," she said. Joe smirked faintly. "I've delivered meals to people who could buy the city 10 times over. I've seen their routines, their secrets, their exits. Now that knowledge belongs to us." Suddenly, a high-pitched whirring sound filled the tunnel. Joe froze. A drone hovered above an exit, sensors glowing red. "They're not just following us, they're hunting," Eleanor whispered. Joe grabbed a metal pipe and threw it across the tunnel, creating a loud crash. The drone adjusted, searching the wrong corner. Joe signaled to Eleanor and Rico. "Move now." They dashed through the passage, wet concrete beneath their feet, pipes scraping their arms. The drone's light swept past them, oblivious. Joe's lungs burned, adrenaline spiking with each step. They emerged onto another rooftop in Queens, the skyline a jagged silhouette against the foggy night. Joe led them into an abandoned loft atop a warehouse. Inside, the space was damp and dusty, but it was dry. Rico checked the perimeter, motioning for safety. Joe placed the chip on a table, his hands shaking slightly from exertion and adrenaline. Eleanor looked around, overwhelmed. "We can't stay here long," she said. Joe nodded. "No, but we can plan. We can regroup. We can strike back." In the Helix Tower, executives watched monitors. The drones had lost sight of Joe and Eleanor, but the footage showed the abandoned tunnel exit. "They're disappearing into the city," one operative said nervously. The CEO's face darkened. "They think we can't follow them? They underestimate us. Deploy more teams, now." Joe didn't know all of this, but he felt the tightening noose in the city streets. Every movement, every decision could be their last. Joe, Eleanor, and Rico spread out maps across a dusty table. "We need to split their attention," Joe said. "Two groups. Make noise in one sector, lure them into dead ends. We move through routes they don't know exist." Eleanor's hands trembled as she traced the paths. "We could actually do this," she said softly. Joe smiled faintly. "Tonight, we survive. Tomorrow, we fight back." A shadow moved along a rooftop across the street. Joe froze. Eleanor pressed herself against a wall, eyes wide. From the shadows, a single enforcer stepped out, gun raised, scanning the rooftop. Rico whispered, "They're right there." Joe's eyes narrowed. "Good. Let them see us. They won't touch us. Not yet. The night is ours, but the city has ears." The abandoned rooftop loft in Queens offered little cover. Joe Malone crouched behind a stack of crates, rainwater dripping from broken windows. Eleanor pressed herself against the wall, the chip burning like a heartbeat in her pocket. Above them, a drone scanned the perimeter with infrared sensors, while across the street, enforcers had spotted movement. Joe whispered to Rico, "They're coming. Stay sharp." Rico nodded, eyes scanning every corner. The enforcers moved like predators, slow but relentless, guns trained, shadows flickering with each light pulse. Joe clenched his fists. They think they own the city? Tonight, they're about to learn differently. As the first enforcer stepped onto the rooftop, Joe grabbed a loose metal pipe. He swung it with precision, knocking the man back. Another enforcer fired, bullets pinging off metal crates. Eleanor ducked instinctively, her heart hammering. Rico rolled across the floor, kicking over a stack of wooden crates to create a makeshift barrier. The fight was chaotic. Rain-soaked surfaces, scattered debris, echoing gunfire. Joe moved like a ghost, guiding Eleanor and Rico, striking when necessary, disappearing before retaliation could hit. After a tense exchange, Joe signaled. Rico crouched, moved to the lower rooftop. They slipped down a fire escape, every movement calculated. Above, drones circled, sending live feeds to Helix's command center. But Joe knew the city's hidden arteries, the gaps, narrow ledges, and forgotten staircases. For every enforcer above, Joe had 3 hidden paths below. They landed in a narrow alley in Brooklyn. Broken fences, dumpsters, and abandoned warehouses created a maze of shadows. Joe led them through, marking diversion points. Rico whispered, "They're still on our tail. They won't give up." Joe nodded. "And we won't let them. Not yet." Eleanor's grip tightened around the chip. This is bigger than I imagined," she said. Joe glanced at her. "Yes. And if we survive tonight, we'll expose them. But first, we have to live." They climbed another series of fire escapes, reaching rooftops that overlooked the East River. From here, the city stretched endlessly, a labyrinth of lights, alleys, and hidden streets. The enforcers split into teams, some on the streets, some on rooftops. Joe pointed to a narrow rooftop path that led to a partially demolished building. "This way," he whispered. They ran, jumping gaps, dodging low-hanging vents. Eleanor stumbled once, but Joe grabbed her arm, pulling her up. Adrenaline surged, the night air whipping past their faces, the sound of helicopters and distant sirens mingling with the rain. Finally, they reached a temporary safe house in a boarded-up loft. Joe connected the chip to his laptop again. Encrypted files spilled across the screen, revealing the full extent of Helix Pharmaceutical's operation. Deadly experimental drugs disguised as harmless trials. Witnesses systematically eliminated. Top politicians and regulators bribed or silenced. Offshore accounts funding a network of mercenaries. Planned corporate takeovers and engineered public crises. Eleanor's face paled. They're untouchable," she whispered. Joe shook his head. "They thought that, but the night has a way of leveling a playing field. And we've got the city on our side." Rico leaned over the laptop, scanning maps and documents. "They're tracking everything, but they don't know these alleys, these tunnels, these forgotten rooftops," he said. Joe nodded. "Exactly. They have technology. We have instinct. The streets speak if you listen. And tonight, we've been listening very carefully." Joe spread a city map across the floor, marking escape routes, ambush points, and temporary safe houses. "We'll split their focus," he said. "Create noise here, mislead them there. The chip stays safe. We stay alive." Eleanor traced a route with her finger. "If we pull this off, we could expose everything." Joe smiled faintly. "Tonight, we survive. Tomorrow, we fight back." Outside, Helix had deployed additional squads. Drones hovered over rooftops, scanning with infrared sensors. SUVs blocked street exits, guns at the ready. The CEO's voice crackled over comms. "They have the chip. Find them. Eliminate all witnesses." Joe didn't hear this, but he felt it in the city's tension. The subtle signs, the shifting shadows, the faint hum of drones. Every step they took was being watched, but the city itself was their ally. From the loft window, Joe spotted movement on the rooftop across the alley. 2 enforcers scanned with flashlights. Joe whispered, "They think the night is theirs." "They're wrong." Eleanor's eyes widened. "We're not going to make it." Joe's hand tightened around the chip. "Wrong. The night belongs to anyone who knows its secrets, and we've been listening longer than they've been hunting." The city stretched before them, drenched in rain, shadows, and neon. The fight had only begun. The first weak rays of sunlight barely pierced the low-hanging fog over Brooklyn. Joe Malone crouched atop a derelict warehouse, rain-soaked and exhausted, eyes scanning the streets below. Eleanor sat beside him, shivering, the chip tucked safely in her jacket. The city was waking, unaware of the deadly game that had raged through the night. Above them, drones hovered intermittently, while black SUVs patrolled distant streets. "They won't stop," Eleanor whispered, voice tight. Joe's eyes narrowed. "Good. That means we know exactly where they'll strike next." Rico joined them silently, carrying a small backpack of supplies. "We can't keep running," he said. "At some point, we have to turn the tables." Joe spread a city map across a nearby crate. "Helix has resources, money, tech, mercenaries, but they don't know these streets like we do. Every alley, every roof, every hidden tunnel is our advantage." Eleanor traced their path from last night. "They're relentless," she said. Joe nodded. "And that's why we hit first. We create diversions, make them chase shadows, and then we extract information from their own systems. Timing is everything." Rico chimed in, pointing to a series of streets along the waterfront. They'll use the docks to move teams in. That's predictable. Joe smiled faintly. Predictable is exploitable. Joe contacted old allies, night couriers, subway workers, and freelance tech operatives. Encrypted messages flickered across their burner phones. Each operative understood the rules: vanish into the city, mislead the enemy, and feed Joe and Eleanor crucial intel. By mid-morning, Joe had created a network of watchers, messengers, and spotters across Manhattan, Brooklyn, and Queens. They're invisible until you know where to look, Joe explained. Eleanor's eyes widened. And we know where to look. By noon, Joe decided to strike first. Rico and 2 allied couriers moved along the docks, setting small diversions: discarded crates, false footprints, and motion sensors triggered to appear like movement. Helix operatives responded immediately, sending drones to investigate. Joe and Eleanor, meanwhile, monitored the feeds remotely, watching the enforcers chase ghosts across warehouses and abandoned piers. Distractions work, Joe muttered, eyes fixed on the screens. Eleanor nodded, adrenaline coursing through her veins. For now, we're in control. Joe led Eleanor to a vantage point atop a skyscraper in lower Manhattan. From there, they could see multiple streets, alleys, and rooftops. Look, Joe said, pointing to a black SUV slowly navigating a narrow street below. They think we're trapped in the tunnels, but we've moved through the hidden paths. They're chasing shadows, and we're hunting reality. Eleanor gripped the chip tightly. I can't believe how much danger we're in, and yet how much control you have over it all. Joe's face was set in grim determination. Experience. Instinct. The city doesn't forgive mistakes, but it rewards those who listen. By mid-afternoon, Helix dispatched a small team to investigate the docks where diversions had been set. Joe's spotters called in. 2 vans, 3 men each, armed and moving cautiously. Time to escalate, Joe whispered. He guided Eleanor and Rico to a rooftop overlooking their target. Using small mirrors and shadows, Joe created a series of false signals, reflections, flares, and noise, luring the Helix operatives into a trap. The team paused, confused, trying to determine the source. Joe grinned faintly. Perfect. From their vantage point, Joe coordinated the movements. Rico and the couriers, hidden in nearby alleyways, signaled with tiny flashlights. Helix operatives moved toward what they thought was Joe's location. Then, a small crate tipped over in the alley, a clatter that echoed through the space. The enforcers froze, scanning. Another crate fell, farther down, creating the illusion of movement. They're dancing to our rhythm, Joe said softly. Eleanor's pulse raced. This is insane and brilliant. As the Helix team focused on the false signals, Joe and Rico descended from the rooftops, silently intercepting one van. 2 enforcers stepped out, guns drawn. Joe moved like a shadow, knocking one unconscious with a precise swing of his metal pipe. Rico incapacitated the other, and they dragged the unconscious men into an alleyway, hiding them from drone cameras. Eleanor watched, heart racing, as Joe's experience and precision kept them safe. This is tactical genius, she murmured. Joe didn't reply. He was already scanning the surrounding streets for the next threat. While the operatives were distracted, Joe hacked into a temporary laptop system inside one of the vans, retrieving logs, emails, and GPS data. This is it, he whispered. The files contained routes, schedules, and live communication channels of Helix's operatives across the city. With this, Joe and Eleanor could predict movements, set traps, and stay one step ahead. Eleanor's eyes widened. So this is how we hit them, before they hit us. Joe nodded. Yes, knowledge is the deadliest weapon. Just as they finished, a drone shadow appeared overhead, larger and more sophisticated than before. Helix was escalating. Reinforcements were coming, faster and smarter. Rico muttered, "They're not playing anymore." Joe's eyes narrowed, hand tightening around the chip. Good. Let them come. The city knows us, and tonight we know the city better. The drone above hummed ominously, its rotors slicing through the foggy afternoon sky. Joe Malone crouched behind a rusted water tower, scanning the streets below. The black SUVs had multiplied. Reinforcements were streaming in, armed, alert, and relentless. "They're learning," Rico muttered, eyes fixed on the approaching vehicles. Joe nodded. "Good. That means we can anticipate them. They still don't know the city like we do." Eleanor tightened her grip on the chip, sweat and rain mixing on her palms. "We can't run forever," she whispered. Joe's jaw clenched. "We won't. We strike first, and we strike smart." Joe led the team through a series of interconnected alleys in Lower Manhattan. They moved silently, their footsteps muffled by wet concrete and discarded cardboard. At a narrow junction, Joe paused. "This is where we make them pay for underestimating us," he whispered. Rico and the Allied courier scattered, taking concealed positions along fire escapes and side alleys. Joe and Eleanor prepared diversion devices, flashing lights, overturned crates, and small timed noise triggers. "Once they see movement here, they won't know where we really are," Joe said. Eleanor nodded, adrenaline coursing through her veins. "It's risky," she admitted. Joe's eyes glinted. "Everything worthwhile is." The first SUV rolled into the alley, tires skidding slightly on puddles. Inside, Helix operatives scanned with flashlights, unaware of the multiple vantage points above. A crate tipped over behind them with a loud crash. Lights flickered, casting shadows across the walls. The SUV's driver cursed, stepping out to investigate. Joe and Rico struck simultaneously. The first operative was knocked unconscious by a swing of Joe's metal pipe. The second was tripped and pinned against the wall by Rico. Eleanor's hands shook as she monitored the remaining threats. "We're really doing this," she whispered. Joe didn't reply. His focus was total. Every movement, every shadow, every heartbeat counted. After incapacitating the first squad, Joe led the team along the rooftops. Rain-slicked surfaces glistened under the city lights. The reinforcements had split, searching for them with drones scanning from above. Joe used his knowledge of the city's hidden routes. Narrow ledges between buildings, rusted scaffolding, partially demolished fire escapes, abandoned maintenance tunnels. Each path was calculated to delay the enemy while keeping them in control. Eleanor followed closely, learning quickly how Joe turned the urban landscape into a weapon. Rico set up small sabotage points along the route, overturned trash cans to make noise, loose metal panels reflecting light into drones' cameras, small timed flares to mislead thermal sensors. Helix operatives stumbled into traps repeatedly, their formation breaking down. Joe whispered to Eleanor, "They're chasing ghosts now. The night belongs to us, not them." Eleanor's confidence grew with each successful diversion. This is brilliant. Pure chaos, but controlled." Joe smiled faintly. "Chaos is only dangerous if you don't know the terrain. The city is our terrain." A larger, more sophisticated drone descended rapidly, scanning rooftops for movement. Joe grabbed a small EMP device from his backpack, timing it carefully. A faint hum, a flash of light, and the drone twitched, then fell from the sky with a metallic crash. Eleanor exhaled in relief. "They're adapting fast," she said. Joe's eyes were cold and focused. "Then we adapt faster. The night rewards those who move first." While taking a brief pause in a hidden rooftop loft, Joe inserted the chip into a secure laptop. Encrypted files revealed new information. Helix was planning a public release of a new pharmaceutical drug with undisclosed deadly side effects. High-ranking politicians and regulators were bribed to approve clinical trials without oversight. Internal whistleblowers had been disappeared under suspicious circumstances. Eleanor gasped. "They've planned all this, and nobody will know if we don't stop them." Joe's face hardened. Then we stop them. Not tomorrow, not next week. Tonight. Joe coordinated with Rico and the allied couriers. One team created diversions in Brooklyn. Another moved silently along rooftops. Joe and Eleanor prepared to intercept another Helix convoy. Through encrypted communication, spotters alerted Joe of movements in Manhattan. They planned a simultaneous strike, mislead, intercept, and extract intelligence. As night fell again, Joe, Eleanor, and Rico moved through Manhattan streets. Helix operatives pursued relentlessly, but Joe's knowledge of hidden streets kept them ahead. The chase escalated. High-speed foot pursuit, rooftop jumps, narrow alley escapes, sudden ambushes to slow the enemy. Eleanor, once terrified, now moved with purpose, reacting to Joe's signals, becoming an active participant in the urban battle. Finally, they reached a secluded industrial area near the East River. Joe scanned the perimeter, realizing they had walked into a trap. Helix reinforcements blocked every exit, guns raised. Drones circled above. Eleanor gripped the chip tightly, eyes wide. Joe whispered, "Good, that's exactly what we wanted them to do." Rico nodded, eyes gleaming with adrenaline. Joe clenched his fists. Now, the real game begins. The industrial area near the East River was silent, except for the hum of drones and the distant lapping of water. Joe Malone crouched behind a stack of shipping containers, eyes scanning the perimeter. Every exit was blocked by Helix operatives, their guns aimed, faces masked with cold precision. Eleanor pressed herself close to Joe, the chip burning like a pulse against her chest. This is it," she whispered. Joe's eyes narrowed, scanning the rooftops and alleys. Exactly, and exactly why we prepared for it. Rico checked the nearby crates, ensuring there were no loose ends in their immediate vicinity. "They've boxed us in," he muttered. Joe's hand brushed the metal pipe at his side. "Good. That means we control the battlefield. We just have to move smart." Joe quickly surveyed their position. 3 SUVs blocked the main road. 2 squads patrolled along the waterfront. Drones hovered above, scanning thermal signatures. But Joe noticed weaknesses. A rusted catwalk running along the edge of the warehouse. A narrow alley behind the stacked shipping containers. A partially collapsed pier leading to another set of warehouses. Joe whispered to Eleanor and Rico, "Follow my lead. We'll create a diversion, hit their blind spots, and disappear before they realize what's happening." Rico grabbed an old barrel and rolls it noisily across the dock. The sound echoed through the warehouses, drawing the attention of 2 squads. Helix operatives turned, guns raised, moving toward the noise. Joe and Eleanor sprinted along the narrow alley, their wet shoes splashing in puddles. Above, a drone scanned the rooftops. But Joe had anticipated its path. A quick toss of a reflective metal sheet created a false heat signature, misleading the drone's thermal sensors. Eleanor blinked, astonished. "How?" Joe didn't answer. He was already moving, eyes focused on the next escape point. The alley ended at a fire escape leading to a crumbling rooftop. Joe signaled Eleanor and Rico to follow. They climbed quickly, careful of rusted steps and wet surfaces. From above, the city sprawled, a jagged maze of neon, shadows, and rooftops. Helix operatives searched below, unaware that Joe's team had vanished above their heads. Joe scanned the horizon, noting a series of interconnected rooftops that could take them toward a hidden maintenance tunnel. "This way," he whispered, leading them across narrow ledges and loose metal beams. A larger drone appeared suddenly, hovering at a rooftop corner. Joe grabbed a loose cable from a nearby antenna and swung it, tangling the drone and sending sparks flying. It crashed onto a lower roof, destroying its camera. Eleanor's hands shook from adrenaline. "They're everywhere," she whispered. Joe's eyes were cold and focused. They're not everywhere. Not if you know where to hide. Rico grinned faintly. This is like chess with bullets. Joe nodded. Exactly. And we're 3 moves ahead. They moved quickly through the rooftops, ducking under scaffolding and leaping across narrow gaps. Every step was calculated, every jump rehearsed. The city was alive beneath them. Pipes creaked, metal groaned, and shadows shifted. Joe led them to a partially collapsed warehouse. Inside, crates and machinery offered cover. From here, they could access the underground maintenance tunnels, a direct route away from Helix's trap. Eleanor clutched the chip, still trembling. How did you know all this? Joe's face was set in grim determination. I've spent decades learning the veins of this city. Every shortcut, every shadow, every escape route. Outside, Helix wasn't giving up. SUVs roared down nearby streets, their headlights cutting through fog. Drones scanned rooftops and alleyways, searching for heat signatures. Joe whispered into a small communicator. Team Alpha, set diversion points at the western perimeter. Team Beta, cover the southern approach. We move in 30 seconds. Eleanor watched, amazed at Joe's calm precision under pressure. This is like war. Joe's eyes didn't leave the tunnels. Exactly. And right now, we're winning. They descended into the maintenance tunnels beneath the warehouse. The smell of damp concrete and rust filled the air. Joe led them quickly through narrow passages, checking corners and exits. Rico and Eleanor followed closely, trusting Joe's instincts. Above, they could hear distant footsteps, muffled shouts, and the faint hum of drones. The enemy was close, but they were moving faster, smarter, and in a way Helix had never anticipated. A squad of Helix operatives appeared at the tunnel exit, blocking their path. Joe whispered, "Split, diversion first." Rico and Eleanor ran in opposite directions, drawing the operatives' fire. Joe used the shadows and tunnel walls to move behind them, incapacitating 2 operatives silently with precise strikes. Gunshots echoed, ricocheting off concrete walls. Eleanor ducked behind a crate, her heart pounding. This is insane! Joe didn't answer. He was already scanning the next corridor for safe passage. After narrowly escaping the squad, they reached a dead end in the tunnels. Joe stopped, listening. The faint sound of heavy boots and gunfire echoed closer. Eleanor turned to him, eyes wide. "What now?" Joe's hand rested on the chip. "We go deeper. There's a route only a few people know. If we take it, we can disappear completely. But it's dangerous. One mistake, and it's over." Rico checked the shadows, nodding. "Let's do it." Joe exhaled, tension in every muscle. "The city is ours, if we survive the next 5 minutes." The maintenance tunnel was narrow, damp, and dimly lit by flickering emergency lights. Joe Malone crouched near the wall, listening to the approaching footsteps. Eleanor pressed herself close, the chip burning against her chest. Rico whispered, "We've got 2 squads closing in from both ends." Joe's jaw tightened. Good. That means they're predictable, and predictable is exploitable. He scanned the dead end. A metal hatch, partially hidden behind stacked crates, led to a forgotten sewer conduit. "This is our way out," he whispered. "But it's risky," muttered. Joe's eyes narrowed. "Everything worthwhile is." Joe pulled out a small map of the underground network. "Rico, you and I will create a diversion at the south exit. Eleanor, you take the chip and move through the conduit. We'll meet at the old water pumping station on 14th Street. Eleanor's eyes widened. "Alone?" Joe nodded. "You move fast. Trust the city to hide you." Rico checked his makeshift weapons and nodded. "Let's make it messy," he said. Joe smiled faintly. "Yes, let's." Joe and Rico ran toward the south end, moving silently but swiftly. They triggered small, timed explosions of discarded barrels, sending smoke and sparks into the tunnel. Helix operatives hesitated, unsure of what they were facing. Joe threw reflective metal panels into the drone's path, causing it to lose thermal tracking. 2 operatives tried to advance, but were disoriented by the smoke and shadows. Rico muttered, "Chaos works better than precision sometimes." Joe's eyes were cold and focused. "Only if you control the chaos." Eleanor moved through the narrow sewer conduit, water splashing around her ankles. Every sound echoed, making her heart pound. She pressed herself against the wet concrete walls, eyes scanning for Helix sensors or drones. She thought of Joe's words, "Trust the city to hide you." Every pipe, corner, and shadow offered cover. She ducked under a low grate, slid past an exposed maintenance ladder, and emerged into a small drainage canal. Above, the city skyline glimmered, oblivious to the battle below. Eleanor took a deep breath, adrenaline mixing with determination. "We're not done yet," she whispered. Joe, monitoring his laptop via encrypted feed from Rico's side, accessed newly intercepted files. The scope of Helix Pharmaceutical's operation was staggering. A new experimental drug, scheduled for mass release next month. Government regulators bribed to approve trials without safety checks. Internal whistleblowers eliminated and replaced with operatives loyal to Helix. A network of mercenaries prepared to silence anyone leaking information. Eleanor's face paled. "They're untouchable, unless we act fast." Joe's jaw tightened. "Exactly. And tonight we act." Joe and Rico moved through the tunnel system, reaching a junction near the canal where Eleanor was headed. Using handheld mirrors and portable flares, they manipulated the shadows to appear in multiple locations at once, confusing Helix operatives. A convoy of SUVs approached the canal's edge, their occupants scanning for movement. Joe whispered, "Time to hit them where it hurts." Rico triggered an old crane mechanism above, tipping crates and barrels into the canal. The vehicles skidded, men shouted, and chaos erupted. Eleanor emerged from the conduit just as Joe and Rico executed the diversion, meeting them at the canal's edge. From the canal, Joe led the team onto a nearby series of rooftops. Helix operatives regrouped, attempting to intercept. Joe used narrow ledges, rusted scaffolding, and hidden fire escapes to outmaneuver them. Rico dropped makeshift smoke grenades, disorienting pursuers. Eleanor, now fully immersed in the tactical operations, guided Joe and Rico through hidden alleys and rooftops using signals they had practiced. Each step, jump, and diversion was precise. The city itself became an ally, offering shadows, cover, and escape routes. While the operatives were occupied, Joe tapped into a temporary laptop inside an abandoned warehouse. He downloaded additional files, GPS coordinates of Helix transport convoys, drone patrol schedules, and internal communications. "This is enough," Joe said grimly. Eleanor looked at him. "To bring them down?" Joe nodded. "Yes, but first survive tonight. Then we expose everything." The team approached a decaying warehouse near the waterfront, their final waypoint for the night. Helix reinforcements had cornered some escape routes, but Joe anticipated every move. Using a combination of hidden tunnels and collapsed scaffolding, they slipped past the majority of the enemy, leaving only confused and trapped operatives behind. Rico exhaled heavily. That was too close. Eleanor clutched the chip. "But we made it." Joe's eyes were already on the next route, scanning the city skyline. "The night isn't over yet, but for now, we've won the battle." As dawn approached, the trio rested briefly atop a warehouse roof overlooking the East River. The city was quiet, but the sense of being hunted lingered. Joe spoke softly. "They know we exist now. They'll escalate. They'll try harder. But so will we." Eleanor nodded, determination shining in her eyes. This isn't just about survival anymore. Rico added, it's about making them pay. Joe clenched his fists, eyes on the horizon. The night is ours, for now, and when the city sleeps, we'll strike again. The streets of Manhattan were quiet, a deceptive calm settling over the city. Joe Malone crouched atop a warehouse roof overlooking the towering silhouette of the Helix pharmaceutical skyscraper. Its glass exterior reflected the neon lights of the city, a fortress of wealth, power, and corruption. Eleanor sat beside him, the chip secure in her jacket. This is it, isn't it?" she whispered. Joe's eyes didn't leave the building. Yes, if we want to expose them, we go in. Tonight. The city will be our ally, but the risks are unlike anything we faced. Rico checked the surrounding rooftops, making sure no surveillance drones were near. He muttered, "They're expecting something." Joe nodded. Exactly. Exactly why we moved differently. They think we'll hit the streets. They won't see the rooftops. Joe spread a detailed map of the Helix complex across a rooftop vent. He marked security camera locations, drone patrol paths, guard rotations, restricted access points, emergency exits. "We enter here," Joe said, pointing to a shadowed maintenance entrance at the back. "From there, we use the service corridors to reach the research labs. Cameras, guards, drones, they're predictable if you know the timing." Eleanor traced the route with her finger. "How do we get past the mainframe room?" Joe smiled faintly. "Leave that to me. Low-tech ingenuity beats high-tech arrogance every time." Rico glanced at the map. "If we get caught, it's over." Joe's expression hardened. "We won't get caught. Not if we stick to the shadows." The team moved along connected rooftops, each step calculated, silent, precise. Rain-slicked metal and broken tiles made every jump a risk. A surveillance drone passed overhead, its sensors scanning the area. Joe ducked into a shadow, pulling Eleanor and Rico down. He tossed a small reflective panel onto the next rooftop, triggering the drone to pause and adjust its thermal scan. It passed harmlessly by. "Too close," Eleanor whispered. Joe grinned faintly. "Too close is where we operate best." Reaching the shadowed maintenance entrance, Joe pried the door open quietly. Inside, the service corridors were dimly lit, narrow, and full of pipes, conduits, and storage crates. Joe led the way, mapping movements silently with hand signals. Eleanor followed closely, adrenaline mixed with determination. Rico brought up the rear, ensuring they weren't being tracked. The corridors twisted like a labyrinth beneath the skyscraper. Joe's knowledge of older construction schematics proved invaluable. "We're ghosts," he whispered. "Every corner, every shadow is our friend." The corridors led to a junction near the research labs. Cameras monitored every angle. Guards patrolled methodically. Joe pulled out small mirror panels and flashlights. By reflecting beams and creating false shadows, he manipulated cameras and distracted guards. Rico disabled a few security sensors with EMP pulses. Eleanor moved carefully, the chip secure. "This is insane," she whispered. Joe's eyes were cold and focused. Insane works, as long as you control the chaos. A guard turned the corner unexpectedly. Joe froze, assessing quickly. With a swift motion, he knocked the guard unconscious, using a precise strike. Another guard appeared, weapon raised. Rico grabbed him and twisted him into the shadows. Eleanor's pulse raced, but she trusted Joe's instincts completely. "This is tactical genius," she murmured. Joe signaled forward. "Keep moving. We're not here to fight anyone unnecessarily. We're here to expose them." They reached the heavy security door leading to the main research lab. Biometric scanners and keypads glowed ominously. Joe assessed the lock and whispered, "This is low-tech versus high-tech. Watch and learn." Using a combination of small wires, reflective sensors, and timing, Joe bypassed the security measures. The door clicked open. Eleanor's eyes widened at the sight of rows of servers, documents, and experimental vials. This is everything, she whispered. Joe nodded grimly. Yes, and we take it all. Joe connected the laptop to the lab's main server. Encrypted files, logs, and internal communications began to download. The scope of Helix's corruption became chillingly clear. Upcoming release of a pharmaceutical with deadly side effects, bribed regulators, silenced whistleblowers, mercenary teams ready to eliminate leaks, offshore accounts funding covert operations and espionage. Eleanor took photos of physical files as backup. Rico scanned the lab, watching for incoming threats. Once we have this, Joe said, there's no hiding. We expose them, or they silence us permanently. Suddenly, alarms blared. Red lights flashed. Helix had detected the breach. Joe's eyes narrowed. They were waiting, he muttered. Rico checked exits and signaled. The corridors were swarming with security. Eleanor clutched the chip. What do we do? Joe's mind raced. We survive. We adapt. The city's still on our side. Follow my lead. They dashed through the service corridors, pursued by heavily armed guards. Fire doors slammed, alarms blared, and surveillance drones tracked every movement. Joe led Eleanor and Rico through maintenance tunnels, using blueprints he had memorized. Helix operatives were relentless, but the team moved faster, dodging, hiding, and creating diversions. Eleanor whispered, breathless, "We can't keep this up forever." Joe's eyes glinted. Not forever, just long enough to finish what we started. They turned a corner, and ahead, a massive, fortified elevator shaft leading to the upper floors, the heart of Helix's operation. Joe's voice was low but firm. This is it. The next level decides everything. The massive elevator shaft loomed ahead, industrial metal gleaming under flickering emergency lights. Joe Malone led the way, gripping the railing, eyes scanning every shadow for movement. Eleanor and Rico followed closely, hearts pounding, adrenaline coursing through their veins. The upper floors of the Helix skyscraper hold the core of the operation: research labs, executive offices, and the server rooms controlling every branch of their network. Joe whispered, "Stay quiet, move fast, and trust the shadows. One misstep, and it's over." The elevator doors were partially open, revealing the shaft. Joe tested the wires and pulleys, creating a temporary rope harness from spare cables. "Rope first, then us," he muttered, checking Eleanor and Rico. They descended silently, listening to the hum of machinery and distant footsteps above. A drone appeared near the upper floors, scanning the shaft. Joe swung a small reflective panel, redirecting its thermal sensors. The drone faltered, then retreated. Eleanor whispered, awestruck, "How do you know all of this?" Joe didn't answer. Eyes on the shaft, he continued guiding them downward. "Experience," he said finally, "and respect for every shadow this city hides." They reached a maintenance hatch on the 42nd floor, just above the executive level. Joe pried it open carefully, revealing a service corridor lined with vents and restricted doors. Rico checked ahead with a small mirror, spotting 2 guards patrolling the hallway. Joe signaled, and they waited for the patrol to pass before slipping silently through the vents. Eleanor's eyes darted to a floor-to-ceiling window over Manhattan. The city glittered, oblivious to the high-stakes game unfolding inside its tallest building. Joe whispered, "Use the city as cover. It's our greatest ally tonight." They navigated the corridors, avoiding cameras and guards, using mirrors, EMP pulses, and timed shadows. Joe accessed a side terminal, downloading additional files. Executive emails detailing bribes and covert operations. Security logs showing enforcement patterns. Drone patrol schedules for the next 72 hours. Eleanor documented physical files, snapping photographs while Rico kept watch. This is explosive, Joe's jaw tightened. Yes, and once we expose it, the world will know everything Helix has done. A door at the end of the corridor opened slightly. Inside, 2 Helix executives were discussing upcoming operations. Rico's hand signaled to stop. Joe whispered, "We don't want to kill anyone if we can avoid it, but we need information." Eleanor nodded, clutching the chip. Joe and Rico moved silently, using the shadows to get behind the executives. With quick, precise action, they incapacitated them without triggering alarms. Eleanor photographed documents on the desk, hands shaking but steady. "One step closer," muttered. "The heart of Helix," Eleanor said quietly. Joe's eyes narrowed. "And that's where we strike next." Alarms suddenly blared throughout the floor. Red lights flashed. Helix operatives had detected anomalies in the upper floors. Joe's eyes scanned the hallway. "They're moving fast, but not fast enough," he whispered. Rico pulled out small EMP grenades, disabling a nearby camera network temporarily. Eleanor stayed close, the chip secure, ready for any sudden movement. The team split. Joe and Rico created a diversion by setting off smoke canisters in the hallway, drawing guards away. Eleanor used the moment to access a secure terminal in the executive suite. Eleanor downloaded critical files while Joe and Rico kept incoming operatives at bay. The data revealed pending global distribution of deadly pharmaceuticals, secret funding channels for covert operations, the identities of key operatives and mercenaries. Eleanor's hands trembled as she worked. This is everything," she whispered. Joe's eyes glinted with determination. "Then we take it and make sure no one can bury it again." With files secured, Joe led the team toward a rooftop exit. Helix operatives had begun closing in, but Joe knew a hidden catwalk leading to the adjacent skyscraper. They moved swiftly, jumping from ledge to ledge, dodging drones and surveillance lights. Rico triggered smoke grenades to cover their escape, while Joe kept an eye on their path. Eleanor clutched the chip, heart racing, as the city skyline spread beneath them. This is madness," she whispered. Joe grinned faintly. "Yes, and it's working." The final rooftop was narrow, with a sheer drop to the streets below. 3 armed Helix operatives blocked the exit to the adjacent building. Joe whispered, "One shot, then move." Rico nodded. Eleanor readied herself to provide distractions if needed. The team executed a flawless ambush. Joe neutralized the first operative silently. Rico took down the second with precision. Eleanor used a flash to disorient the third, allowing Joe to subdue him. The way forward was clear. One final jump to the adjacent skyscraper's roof, and they could disappear into the city. Standing atop the adjacent skyscraper, the team paused to catch their breath. Below, the streets were quiet, but drones hovered in the distance. Joe looked at Eleanor and Rico. "This is only the beginning. They know we exist now. They'll escalate everything." Eleanor nodded, determination burning in her eyes. "We have the evidence. Now we make them pay." Rico checked the shadows. "The city is ours, for now." Joe's eyes glinted. "And when night falls again, we strike." The adjacent skyscraper rooftop was slick with rain, neon reflections casting eerie shadows. Joe Malone, Eleanor, and Rico crouched behind a vent stack, surveying the building next door, the true Helix headquarters. Through the glass, they could see executives moving in a heavily guarded control room, screens flashing with live data feeds and security channels. Joe whispered, "This is it, the heart of the operation. One wrong step, and it's over." Eleanor's hands gripped the chip tightly. "We can't fail now." Rico checked his makeshift weapons, his face set in grim determination. "Then we don't." Joe pulled out the rooftop map of the adjacent skyscraper. Guards rotate every 90 seconds. Cameras sweep every 30. There's a maintenance shaft over there that leads directly to the executive floor. We move fast, silent, and keep the advantage. Eleanor traced the route with her finger. "And if we're detected?" Joe's jaw tightened. "Then we fight smart. Every exit, every cover, every shadow is calculated." Rico nodded. "Time to finish what we started." The team climbed the rusted ladder into the maintenance shaft. It smelled of oil and wet metal. Every step echoed faintly. Above, a drone hummed near the rooftop, scanning the surroundings. Joe swung a small reflective panel, redirecting its thermal sensors. The drone faltered, then retreated. "Too close for comfort," Eleanor muttered. Joe smiled faintly. "Too close is where we operate best." They descended to the executive floor, moving through service corridors, each step timed with precision. At the junction outside the executive floor, 2 heavily armed guards patrolled. Joe signaled, and the team split. Rico used a combination of shadows and distraction, knocking one guard unconscious silently. Joe moved on the second guard, using precise strikes to incapacitate him. Eleanor provided cover by triggering a temporary smoke panel, blinding the nearby camera. The path to the core control room was clear, for now. Joe whispered, "We're ghosts. Don't make a sound." The door slid open, revealing a large, high-tech control room. Screens displayed surveillance feeds, experimental drug formulas, financial records, and internal communications. Executives and security officers were present, unaware of the intruders behind them. Joe, Eleanor, and Rico slipped into the shadows. Eleanor whispered, This is everything. Every secret. Every plan." Joe nodded. "Yes, and it's time to make them accountable." One executive noticed movement and shouted. Alarms blared. Helix operatives drew weapons. Joe reacted instantly. Rico created smoke and flashed lights to disorient them. Joe moved with precision, disabling security personnel silently. Eleanor accessed terminals, downloading critical data and taking photographs. Gunfire echoed, ricocheting off walls. The team moved like shadows, coordinated and lethal. Eleanor transmitted the stolen files to a secure off-site server. Joe and Rico guarded the room, neutralizing incoming operatives. The files revealed the full extent of Helix's corruption. Dangerous drugs ready for release, bribery of regulators and officials, covert assassination teams, offshore accounts funneling illegal profits. Eleanor looked at Joe, voice shaking. "We finally have proof. The world will know." Joe's eyes were cold and determined. "Yes, but first we survive this floor." With files secured, Joe led the team to the rooftop. Helix reinforcements were closing in, drones scanning every angle. Joe spotted a secondary rooftop with a broken bridge across the alley. "Jump, follow me," he whispered. Rico and Eleanor followed. The gap was wide, wet, and dangerous. Joe went first, landing firmly. Rico and Eleanor followed, narrowly avoiding a drone spotlight. Below, guards shouted and fired, but the team was already moving, disappearing into the urban maze. They ran across rooftops, narrow alleys, and fire escapes, weaving through the city like phantoms. Helix operatives were relentless, but Joe's knowledge of the city's hidden paths gave them an edge. Smoke from nearby industrial vents masked their movements. Rico set off timed diversions, toppling crates and barrels to mislead pursuers. Eleanor guided them using hand signals, fully integrated into the tactical operations. Every step, jump, and maneuver was precise. Every heartbeat counted. Finally, the team reached a high rooftop overlooking the East River. The city stretched below them, oblivious to the chaos and corruption they had just uncovered. Joe turned to Eleanor and Rico. "This is only the beginning. They know we exist now. They'll escalate everything." Eleanor nodded, determination blazing. "We have the evidence. We expose them, no matter what." Rico scanned a horizon. "The city is ours, for now." Joe's eyes glinted, "And when night falls again, we strike harder." The wind whipped across the rooftop, carrying the faint scent of rain and the distant hum of the city. Joe Malone crouched behind Eleanor and Rico, eyes scanning the surrounding skyscrapers. They had survived the heart of Helix, secured the chip, and downloaded critical data, but the night was far from over. Eleanor, breathing heavily, held the chip tightly. We did it," she whispered. Joe's eyes remained on the skyline. "Yes, but survival is step 1. Step 2 is exposing them." Rico checked the rooftops, spotting faint movements of drones and security teams below. He said, "They're regrouping," he said. Joe nodded, "And so do we. But this time, we turn the tables." Joe spread a rooftop map, marking key points of the Helix skyscraper and surrounding streets. "We're not just escaping, we're striking at their core operations. Their drones, vehicles, and communication hubs will all be neutralized tonight. Then the evidence goes global." Eleanor's eyes widened. "You mean, take them down?" Joe nodded. "Yes, make it impossible for them to bury the truth." Rico checked the makeshift explosives, EMP devices, and diversion tools. "Time to make chaos work for us," he said. Joe's expression hardened. "Exactly. Controlled chaos." Descending through hidden stairwells, the team approached the perimeter of the skyscraper. They avoided street-level security by using service tunnels and abandoned maintenance shafts. Joe led Eleanor and Rico through a series of interconnected alleys and scaffolding. Every shadow, every vent, every loose metal sheet became part of their plan. Above them, drones scanned the area, but Joe's makeshift EMP pulses created blind spots. Rico muttered, "They're hunting shadows, not people." Joe smiled faintly. "And that's exactly how we want it." The team reached Helix's primary operations hub in the basement, servers controlling drones, communications, and security cameras. Joe set small EMP charges, timing them carefully. Rico placed diversion explosives in the service corridors. Eleanor hacked into the servers, uploading the secured files to an off-site global server, ensuring the evidence would reach media outlets and whistleblower organizations. Within moments, alarms erupted. Drones fell from the sky, lights flickered, communications jammed. Helix security was in chaos, unsure of the origin of the attack. Joe whispered to Eleanor, "We just leveled the playing field." Rushing back to the upper floors, Joe, Eleanor, and Rico confronted the Helix executive team. The executives, realizing the breach, attempted to flee but were met with the team's calculated ambush. Joe moved with lethal precision. Guards were incapacitated, security doors sealed by EMP devices, executives trapped, facing the consequences of their actions. Eleanor recorded every confrontation, every detail, ensuring a complete visual and digital record. The executive's fear was palpable. Joe's voice was cold, unwavering. The world will see everything, every bribe, every cover-up, every life you endangered. With the executive secured and evidence transmitted globally, the team ascended to the rooftop once more. Helix reinforcements attempted to regroup, but EMP devices, smoke screens, and timed diversions kept them at bay. Eleanor, clutching the chip, looked over the city. The evidence, it's out there. Everyone will know. Joe nodded. Yes, and the ones responsible won't be able to hide. Rico checked their escape route, a rope swing to an adjacent building and then the city streets below. Ready for the final jump? He asked. Joe grinned faintly. Always. The team leaped across the rooftop gap, landing safely on the adjacent building. Below, streets were chaotic, security teams searching, drones circling, but Joe's team melted into the shadows. Rico triggered timed diversions, overturned crates, fire alarms, and flashing lights. Eleanor guided the team through hidden alleys, maintenance tunnels, and forgotten passageways. The city became a partner, hiding their movements and providing cover. Joe whispered, "Tonight, the city protects those who fight for the truth." As dawn approached, Eleanor transmitted the final batch of files to global media outlets, whistleblowers, and legal authorities. Financial transactions, secret experiments, and internal communications were now public knowledge. Rico smiled grimly. They'll never cover this up. Joe's eyes remained on the city skyline. They can try, but truth has a way of spreading. Back at Helix headquarters, chaos reigned. Drones offline, vehicles immobilized, executives trapped and exposed, global authorities alerted, employees realizing their corruption. The empire that once ruled with impunity was crumbling. And Joe Malone, Eleanor, and Rico had become the ghosts who dismantled it from within. The trio stood atop a rooftop overlooking the city, exhausted but resolved. Joe looked at Eleanor and Rico. This isn't the end. They'll try to fight back. They'll adapt. Eleanor nodded. But the evidence is out. They can't undo what we've done. Rico added, the city knows now. That's our advantage. Joe clenched his fists, eyes burning with determination. The night belongs to those who fight in shadows, and as long as we breathe, the fight continues. The skyline stretched endlessly, neon reflections glimmering in the river below, signaling the beginning of a new, dangerous chapter. The first light of dawn reflected on the skyscrapers, casting the city in pale gold. Joe Malone, Eleanor, and Rico sat atop an abandoned rooftop overlooking the streets below. The city appeared calm, but Joe knew better. The world just changed last night, Joe said quietly. Eleanor, still clutching the chip, nodded. And Helix, they're going to retaliate. Rico exhaled heavily. They'll try, but they won't know how or when we strike next. The news erupted within hours. International media broadcast Helix's internal files. Whistleblower organizations confirmed the authenticity of the data. Governments froze Helix assets and opened investigations. Social media exploded with outrage, demanding accountability. In boardrooms across New York, London, and Geneva, executives scrambled. Helix's empire, once untouchable, was now under a global microscope. Eleanor whispered, staring at her phone. This is bigger than we imagined. Joe's eyes remained on the city skyline. Bigger than anyone imagined. And they'll come for us. In a secure Helix facility, the CEO slammed a fist against the desk. "They leaked the files," he roared. His top security officer spoke cautiously. "They infiltrated the skyscraper. The team, they're ghosts." Helix prepared a global response. Private mercenary teams mobilized, drone and satellite surveillance intensified, key personnel placed under high security, covert operations planned to retrieve the chip. Joe's voice echoed in Eleanor's mind. "They'll escalate. We need to be ready." Joe led the team through abandoned subway tunnels and hidden maintenance shafts. Their temporary hideout was an old deserted logistics warehouse near the East River. Rico checked communications, ensuring they were not being tracked. "All clean for now," he said. Joe studied the city skyline. Temporary calm, but it won't last. Helix knows we exist, and they'll strike. Eleanor mapped out potential safe houses and escape routes. "The city is ours to move through," she said. Joe nodded. "Yes, and we use every shadow, every alley, every hidden path to our advantage." They reviewed the Helix data once more. Illegal drug trials exposed. Executives' bribery and corruption documented. Mercenary operations revealed. Internal communications and offshore accounts decrypted. "This is enough to bring them down," Eleanor said. Joe's jaw tightened. "Enough to start the process, but they'll fight, and fight hard." Rico added, "We've made them enemies of the world now. They'll try to reclaim control." Joe's eyes burned with determination. "Then we anticipate, we prepare, and we strike again on our terms." Joe outlined potential Helix responses. Attempting to recover the chip, tracking team movements via drones, satellites, and informants, employing mercenaries for direct attacks, leveraging media manipulation to discredit leaks. "We know their playbook," Joe said. Eleanor frowned. "And we know theirs, but we can't predict everything." Joe's eyes scanned the horizon. "No, but we can control our actions. That's our edge." The team spent the next 48 hours training, refining strategies, and gathering resources. Rooftop maneuvers and escape drills, urban camouflage and shadow navigation, EMP devices, makeshift weapons and diversion tools, digital security protocols and secure communication channels. Joe drilled them relentlessly. "Helix will try to hunt us. We need to be faster, smarter, and more unpredictable. Every alley, every shadow, it's our battlefield." Eleanor monitored Helix communications remotely. They're scrambling mercenary teams, redeploying drones, and tracking satellites. Joe nodded. "They'll make mistakes. Every empire that falls does, and we'll exploit them." Rico added, "We can't underestimate them. They'll strike anywhere." Joe's voice was calm but firm. "Exactly. We anticipate, adapt, and survive. Then we finish what we started." Joe identified key locations Helix would likely strike. Known hideouts, frequent escape routes, secondary rooftop passages, hidden warehouses used for logistics. "We use the city itself as bait," Joe explained. Eleanor looked concerned. "And if we miscalculate?" Joe's eyes were unwavering. "We don't. Every detail has been accounted for, and if they come, they'll find shadows waiting." As night fell again, the city's neon lights reflected off wet streets. The team prepared for another confrontation, knowing Helix's retaliation was imminent. Joe looked over Eleanor and Rico. They'll come for us, and when they do, the city becomes our battlefield. Eleanor tightened her grip on the chip. We're ready. Rico glanced at the skyline, determination in his eyes. Let them come. We're not running. The city sprawled endlessly before them, shadows stretching like predators waiting for the hunt. Joe whispered, eyes burning with resolve. The night is ours until we choose to strike again. The city streets of Manhattan were uneerily quiet as night fell, but beneath the calm, Helix operatives moved like shadows, deploying drones, surveillance teams, and mercenaries. Joe Malone, Eleanor, and Rico monitored the activity from a hidden warehouse overlooking the East River. "They've started," Eleanor said, eyes scanning the rooftops with binoculars. Joe's jaw tightened. "They think they can catch ghosts. They're wrong." Rico checked the makeshift weapons and EMP devices. "Then we remind them who controls the night." Joe spread a rooftop map of Helix's operational zones, drone patrol paths, likely mercenary entry points, surveillance camera clusters, secondary rooftop approaches. "We use their aggression against them," Eleanor said. "You mean trap them?" Joe's eyes glinted. "Yes, make them walk into shadows they can't see." Rico smirked. "Sounds like fun." A team of mercenaries advanced along an alleyway near the warehouse. Joe signaled, and the team split into position. Rico dropped a barrel, creating a loud distraction. Drones hovered, momentarily confused by the heat signal anomaly. Eleanor, positioned above on a hidden catwalk, activated a flash diversion. Joe moved silently, neutralizing two approaching operatives with precise, non-lethal strikes. "Keep moving," he whispered. "The city is ours tonight." The team advanced across rooftops and alleys, exploiting Helix's blind spots. Joe disabled surveillance sensors with makeshift EMP pulses. Eleanor guided movements with hand signals and precise timing. Rico set diversions to funnel mercenaries into traps. Helix drones were deployed, but Joe and Eleanor anticipated every movement, using reflections and shadows to manipulate thermal cameras. The team's coordination made them nearly untouchable, ghosts in the urban landscape. Eleanor hacked into Helix's communications network, intercepting real-time orders to mercenary teams. "They're moving squads into the Lower East Side," she reported. Joe nodded. "Then we strike where they least expect it." Rico prepared explosives to disable a strategic drone hub. Timing will be everything. The team set up a series of diversions, smoke canisters in alleyways, flashes to disorient drone sensors, crates toppled to block secondary streets. Mercenaries moved blindly into zones Joe had pre-planned. Two squads collide, confused and disoriented. Joe and Rico moved silently, incapacitating them efficiently. Eleanor secured the perimeter, ensuring no reinforcements could flank them. Controlled chaos worked perfectly. The city itself became a weapon. The team reached a high rooftop overlooking the East River. A squad of Helix operatives attempted to cut them off. Joe whispered, "This is where shadows fight." Rico triggered timed diversions below, while Joe and Eleanor prepared tactical ambush points. The operatives approached, unaware they were walking into an orchestrated trap. Joe moved with precision, disabling two guards. Eleanor used the rooftop vents to disorient another squad with flash and smoke. Rico neutralized the remaining operatives using surprise maneuvers. The rooftop was clear. Helix attempted to extract key mercenaries via hover vehicles. Joe signaled Eleanor and Rico. They'll land on the docks. We can't let them regroup. They moved silently down service stairs to the dock rooftops. Joe rigged a series of EMP pulses targeting hover vehicles' engines. Rico set flash diversions to confuse the pilots. Eleanor coordinated timing, ensuring all drones and operatives were blinded simultaneously. Vehicles crashed harmlessly into the water, forcing Helix personnel to retreat. Joe muttered, "One less pawn, one step closer to the king." The team returned to the city's alleyways, setting traps for incoming Helix reinforcements. Joe anticipated 3 potential entry points and rigged them with noise diversions, flash and smoke traps, hidden escape paths. Helix squads walked directly into the ambush. Confused, disoriented, and blinded, they fell victim to non-lethal takedowns. Eleanor documented every movement, ensuring future leverage. Joe smiled faintly. Urban warfare in its purest form. Standing atop a quiet rooftop overlooking the city skyline, Joe, Eleanor, and Rico surveyed the aftermath. Streets below were chaos for Helix, yet eerily calm from their vantage point. Eleanor whispered, "We've hit them hard, but they'll strike back." Joe's eyes burned with determination. "Yes, and when they do, we'll be ready. Shadows are our allies, and the city is our battlefield." Rico checked his watch. "The night belongs to those who fight smart, and we fight smarter." The neon lights reflected off the rain-soaked streets, hinting at the coming storm. Joe whispered, almost to himself, "The night is ours, until the final strike." The city hummed beneath them, oblivious to the final act about to unfold. Joe Malone, Eleanor, and Rico gathered on a deserted rooftop overlooking Helix's central skyscraper. "This is it," Joe said quietly, eyes scanning the fortress below. Eleanor, clutching the chip, nodded. "We have the evidence, but we need to finish this. No loose ends." Rico checked their equipment, EMP devices, makeshift explosives, and surveillance jammers. "They won't see us coming," he said grimly. Joe's eyes burned with resolve. "Then we strike hard, precise, and leave no room for them to recover." Using the knowledge from their previous infiltration, the team approached Helix from a rarely used service shaft. Drones and cameras were partially offline thanks to prior EMP disruptions. Joe led the descent, Eleanor and Rico following closely. Every step was silent, every shadow a shield. Rico whispered, "This is it. We're in their backyard." Joe nodded. "And this time, we end it." They reached the main executive floor, the control room where Helix's CEO and senior leadership were coordinating global operations. The executives looked up in shock as Joe, Eleanor, and Rico emerged from the shadows. Weapons were drawn, but Joe signaled them to hold fire. "We're here for the truth," he said. Eleanor connected her device to the central terminal, ensuring all files were uploaded to multiple secure servers worldwide. The CEO snarled, "You think a few files will destroy us?" Joe's eyes were icy. "No, but the truth will." As Helix mercenaries advanced, Joe, Eleanor, and Rico executed a coordinated strike. Joe and Rico neutralized guards with precision, using non-lethal force when possible. Eleanor controlled the room's systems, locking doors and disabling cameras. Smoke and flash diversions disoriented remaining threats. The executives realized they were trapped. Joe stepped forward, his voice calm but unwavering. "This ends tonight. The world knows everything. Your empire of lies collapses." With Helix leadership contained, the team moved to the rooftop for extraction. Eleanor transmitted final evidence packets to global media, legal authorities, and whistleblower networks. Drones attempted to intercept them, but Joe's strategic EMPs disabled the aerial threat. Rico signaled the escape route, a rope swing to the adjacent building, and then into the underground subway network. The city below erupted in sirens and flashing lights as law enforcement and global authorities began to act on the evidence. Joe whispered, "This is only the beginning. The world will hold them accountable now." Back in the skyscraper, chaos reigned. Executives detained or in hiding, mercenary operations disrupted, security systems offline, global authorities enforcing freezes and investigations. The empire that once operated with impunity was shattered. Joe, Eleanor, and Rico had become the unseen architects of its downfall. The team navigated the urban maze to their final safe house. The city, with its alleys, rooftops, and tunnels, had been both battlefield and shield. Joe looked at Eleanor and Rico, determination etched into his features. "We survived because we adapted. The city protected those who fight in shadows." Eleanor smiled, exhaustion and relief mingling. "And now the world will know." Rico added, "And Helix can't touch us. Not tonight." The three of them surveyed the city skyline from the safety of their hideout. Neon lights reflected off the rain-soaked streets, a reminder of the night's battles. Joe spoke softly, almost to himself. "The night belongs to those who understand it and use it wisely. We fought for the truth, and now it has a chance to shine." Eleanor clenched the chip, a symbol of victory and responsibility. Rico added, "The night continues, but so do we." As the first light of day broke over Manhattan, the city seemed peaceful, oblivious to the chaos that had just unfolded. Joe, Eleanor, and Rico vanished into the shadows, aware that their fight was far from over. Joe whispered, eyes burning with resolve, "The night isn't over, and neither are we." The city skyline stretched endlessly, neon fading into the early sun, signaling the start of a new chapter, a new mission, and the unending war against corruption. The first light of morning spilled over Manhattan, illuminating streets still glistening from rain. Helix's empire lay exposed. Government agencies secured the headquarters, detained executives, and froze accounts. News outlets broadcast the leaks worldwide, analyzing the internal corruption of one of the most powerful corporations on Earth. Joe Malone, Eleanor, and Rico observed the city from a safe distance, their presence unknown to anyone. "The night is done," Eleanor said softly. "For now, but corruption never sleeps." Rico lit a cigarette, inhaling deeply. "And neither will we." The three of them surveyed the city skyline from the safety of their hideout. Neon lights reflected off the rain-soaked streets, a reminder of the night's battles. Joe spoke softly, almost to himself. "The night belongs to those who understand it and use it wisely. We fought for the truth, and now it has a chance to shine." Eleanor clenched the chip, a symbol of victory and responsibility. Rico added, "The night continues, but so do we." As the first light of day broke over Manhattan, the city seemed peaceful, oblivious to the chaos that had just unfolded. Joe, Eleanor, and Rico vanished into the shadows, aware that their fight was far from over. Joe whispered, eyes burning with resolve, "The night isn't over, and neither are we." The city skyline stretched endlessly, neon fading into the early sun, signaling the start of a new chapter, a new mission, and the unending war against corruption. The first light of morning spilled over Manhattan, illuminating streets still glistening from rain. Helix's empire lay exposed. Government agencies secured the headquarters, detained executives, and froze accounts. News outlets broadcasted the leaks worldwide, analyzing the internal corruption of one of the most powerful corporations on Earth. Joe Malone, Eleanor and Rico observed the city from a safe distance, their presence unknown to anyone. "The night is done," Eleanor said softly. Joe's eyes scanned the skyline. "For now. But corruption never sleeps." Rico lit a cigarette, inhaling deeply. "And neither will we." The team reflected on the nights that had passed, the infiltration, the battles, the danger. Each member bore scars, both physical and emotional. Eleanor whispered, "We risked everything. For the truth. Was it worth it?" Joe smiled faintly. "The truth always is, and now the world can see it." Rico added, "We've won this battle, but the war against greed and corruption continues." In a hidden safe house, Eleanor ensured the chip and backups were securely stored. "This is more than just files," she said. "It's accountability, transparency, a chance to prevent future crimes." Joe nodded. "And we protect it. The world may see, but it's up to us to safeguard it until justice acts." Rico glanced at the city beyond the window. "We've lit a fire they can't extinguish. That's enough for tonight." Joe reflected on the journey, from being a lone courier to orchestrating the downfall of a global corporation. Every alley, every shadow, every risk had led them here. "I never imagined it would come to this," Joe said quietly. Eleanor placed a hand on his shoulder. "You did what few could, and you did it with integrity." Rico smirked. "Integrity? Yeah, that's one way to put it. I'd call it urban chaos management." Global reactions poured in. Lawmakers praised the exposure of Helix's corruption. Investors withdrew from compromised assets. Media analysts dissected the internal workings and bribery schemes. Whistleblower organizations celebrated transparency. The world knew the truth, and Helix's power was irrevocably broken. Eleanor watched a broadcast showing authorities escorting executives into custody. "They're finally facing consequences," she whispered. Joe nodded. "Yes, and it's only the beginning of accountability." The team discussed their next steps. Joe outlined long-term strategies. Protect the evidence. Monitor remaining Helix operatives. Identify emerging threats in the city. Maintain urban networks of information and shadow routes. Rico chuckled. "So, we keep being ghosts?" Joe smiled. "Yes, ghosts with purpose, shadows with intent." Eleanor added, "And we keep the city safe from what most can't even see." Each member contemplated the personal cost and growth. Joe had discovered his strategic and leadership potential. Eleanor realized her skills could impact the world beyond conventional channels. Rico embraced discipline and tactical precision beyond his street instincts. Joe said softly, "We've all changed. We've all grown." Eleanor nodded. "And the world will change with us in ways they don't even realize yet." Rico added, "And we'll be ready for the next night." As evening approached, the city's lights flickered on, neon reflections shimmering across wet streets. The trio returned to their observation point atop a high rooftop, watching life continue below, unaware of the battle that had just been fought and won. Joe whispered, almost to himself, "The night is endless, but for now, we've done our part." Eleanor held the chip, a symbol of truth and vigilance. "And when the night calls again, we'll answer." Rico nodded. "Always ready. Always ghosts." Though Helix was in ruins, loose threads remained. Minor operatives still at large. Global corporate networks subtly influenced by Helix's remnants. Emerging threats, unseen, waiting in the shadows. Joe looked over Manhattan, eyes burning with resolve. The fight never truly ends, and neither will we. The neon city stretched endlessly, a canvas for shadows and truth, for the night couriers who ensured the world could not ignore corruption again. The city, indifferent to the chaos and justice that had unfolded, carried on. Joe, Eleanor, and Rico melted into the urban landscape, invisible to the world, guardians of the truth. Eleanor whispered, "We've made a difference tonight." Joe's gaze remained on the horizon. "Yes, but the night belongs to those who understand it, and we do." Rico smirked. "Then let the night come. We're ready."